everyone. Welcome to Tribeca's new music series called INVIEWS, and I'm here with James Moore today. Thank you so much for being here, James.
Hi,
Um,
Maya.
Hi. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your musical journey. I
Okay, yeah,
know it's a long
didn't-
one.
it's okay. No, I didn't prepare myself. Well, my musical journey, I'm a guitar player and a composer, and I played a lot of music when I was young. I played piano and clarinet in the, middle school orchestra kind of thing. But it wasn't until I stole my sister's guitar from under her bed and started teaching myself songs that I really kind of caught the bug to be a musician as sort of a lifestyle, right? And started a bunch of weird bands with my friends and wrote silly songs and just sort of it was my main outlet as a sort of angsty teenager to create music. And so when I went to college, I thought, oh, I'm going to be a composer. It's going to be great. And I was actually initially sort of um, not discouraged. I had really good teachers, but I was initially intimidated, at least myself, to consider myself a composer because I felt like I didn't have the right tools. In the meantime, I was a pretty good guitar player and I was studying classical guitar and I started excelling at that. And so I sort of went on this sort of side route to being a classical musician. Um, and as I continued to excel at that, I was in California, went to UC Santa Cruz, and then I went to grad school at the Yale School of Music. That was a big deal for me to move across the country to study music. And while I was doing that at supposedly a higher level, I of course started getting jaded with the classical music community and realizing that while there's a lot of beautiful beauty in it and a lot of opportunity, it did feel limited to me. And so at the same time, I was getting really interested in contemporary music. I was starting new weird bands with my friends. I was starting to write a little bit more myself again, and sort of caught the bug to move to New York and be a professional guitarist who could kind of what I wanted when I first moved to New York was like be the person that you could ask to do anything. Like you need me to play banjo, mandolin, electric guitar, classical guitar, whatever you want, I'll do it. And that's sort of what happened, but I stressed myself out a lot in the meantime too. And as all that, and I still do that kind of stuff, but I personally, Dither, the group that's playing for the Tribeca Festival, is more of a contemporary ensemble that specializes. We play original music, but we also play music of other composers. But that group and other groups that I was working with, I was finding everything, at least the most exciting gigs, to be increasingly collaborative, increasingly creative. And so for myself, I use that as a way into sort of going full circle back to composing and starting more weird bands with my friends, and being a professional composer, guitarist, whatever you need me to be. So that's a very long-winded description of my
No,
journey.
it was fantastic. I think it was really interesting to sort of see how you bounced back from seeing yourself as a composer and seeing yourself as a guitarist, but you're two in the same, you're jack of all trades. You play mandolin, guitar, banjo, and you compose. So how sort of like do you
Sorry.
see them as two separate things that you do? You're a composer and a musician, or because I know that they're so intertwined.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, this whole, sort of division between composer and performer is a very niche thing. Like 99% of music made in the world doesn't even make that distinction.
Right.
And even in real classical music from hundreds of years ago, there wasn't as much of a distinction. It's really sort of the last, I mean, I don't claim to be an expert, but I feel like almost a 20th century phenomenon to have this sort of like rigid difference between a composer and a performer. And yeah, I think that's really those. If there were lines, there are fewer of them than there ever have been, and especially with the way people are making music on computers, recording, and being able to create the music yourself is such a fundamental part of composing music. Um, I think it shouldn't be a unique thing.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
it's so interesting because when you think about, sort of cultural music, um, I'm just thinking about Appalachian music for some reason. It's very improvisationary and very much like you are the composer in that moment, and also, taking from the past standards of songs and then just composing what you want out of that. And so it's interesting that we've sort of switched into having education that's very rigid, saying,
yeah.
oh, you either compose this way or you're a musician this way. So that's really interesting that you can see the bridge between those two.
And I think it's getting better. I mean, again, like as I said earlier, when I first studied music, I did feel a little bit of that sort of rub, like I have to be this or that. And thinking back on it, it's not because any of my teachers were great. I was exposed to tons of different stuff. I would never speak badly of my music education in that way, but the reality of how people sort of were funneled into these sort of roles, it was real,
Yeah.
and I think still exists and is getting better. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I saw on your website that you work across a lot of art forms, and I think it's really important to also note, the really intertwining of different collaborations and artistic multimedia art that's happening right now too, in the 21st century. So how do you see like collaborative multimedia art and its influence like moving forward in the music world,
well, I mean,
entering these traditional structures?
again, I would also sort of pose that it's not like it's always existed, right?
Right, right.
Music and art, visual art that is, and performance of all types have always coexisted. So it's really more of a matter of how you sort of what lens and focus you put in it in. So for me, yeah, I love working on any kind of thing that involves multimedia. I work with a theater company a lot, the New York City Players. I've worked with dance. And even with the music that I consider to be chamber music, more or less for you to sit down and be quiet and listen in a concert hall, I'm almost always thinking a little bit more about the space and, not necessarily staging things, but what are the subtle things you can do with light, with positioning of the audience. In my dream situations, I have control over all of those parameters, and that makes even something that's more or less a purely musical performance a sort of more multifaceted thing.
Yeah, that's super cool. So Dither was formed when you moved to New York?
Yeah, pretty much right off the bat. Taylor Levine and I well, the group, Taylor Levine, myself, James Moore, and Joshua Lopes have been in the group since the very start. And Taylor got us all together because we had gotten some of Fred Frith's guitar music from a friend, and we thought it would be fun to read through it. And I think for the very beginning, we had the idea of like, oh, it'd be good to perform this, but it started off very casual. And it just really it clicked. It just sort of seemed like there was momentum. We immediately sort of had friends who were composers who wanted to write for us, and original music art was always sort of a part of it from the start. Josh Lopes particularly had a lot of music for the group early on, and yeah, just I can even remember some funny conversations when we first started. Taylor saying like, "Oh, we got to get some street cred, then we'll be able to like push for some." And then 2 years later, we had suddenly been playing some real festivals and getting gigs that actually paid, and it seemed like it was actually a feasible project. And it's just continued. Feel like I'm very lucky that Dither and a lot of the projects that I started early on. Really have kept going because everybody cares about it, and it's a family, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's super cool. And I mean, your success has shown since Bandcamp recently named your album the best contemporary classical pick
I know I'm making
of
so much money
2022,
from that. It's
which is
amazing. Oh yeah.
crazy. Can you tell us about that new album and what that sort
Sure.
of process was making that?
Yeah, that's actually, this sort of goes back to to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, sort of when I was coming back to
Yeah.
identifying more as a composer,
Right, right.
sort of coming directly from doing very hands-on sort of creative work as a performer. And it's not like I ever thought like I was writing the music for the composers I was working with. There's a funny thing when you're improvising or you're sort of crafting sort of open elements. But I did, without claiming that I was doing the composer's work for them. I did sort of had a realization that I could do it myself, without a prompt from somebody else. And
Yeah.
so yeah, early on, I started this group, the Hands Free, which is another regular group of mine that was always just sort of workshopping little musical ideas. And around that same time, I had a residency at the Stone, and I wanted to write some, chamber music, whatever that means. And I had talked to Kathy Sapove, who's another collaborator of mine. We've played on the Tribeca Fest several times. And I said we should work something up. She had talked about maybe having me write a piano piece for her, and I sort of had this weird idea of it being a solo piano piece, but with sort of an open instrumentation accompaniment with. At the time, it was just going to be any instruments that happened to be in the room. But that first performance, we had a lot of strings. And the players were sort of reading the piano music with various instructions about notes to hold out and various, sonic instructions. And it was great. It was really scrappy the first time, but a success. And that slowly started sort of becoming a more distinct vision of a piece for piano with strings. And more things got formalized. I think a lot of the piece still has a lot of sort of open elements, or at least an open spirit to it, but more things were formalized as we went, and it became this big piece for the Rhythm Method String Quartet and Kathy. And we just came out with a record of that. And that also has two other pieces, a piece I wrote for Nathan Kosi, who's the accordionist in my group, The Hands Free, and also a piece I wrote for a harpist friend, Claire Happel Ash. And so these are all three pieces that I sort of wrote around the same time, right when I was sort of kind of trying to identify what it meant for me to write concert music, and something that I'm still trying to figure out. I think every composer is, right? But yeah, it's kind of cool to have this CD now of like music that's mostly 4 or 5 years old, that feels like an old friend. I feel like God, pandemic has happened since. There's so much that's changed in the world. Um, but it's kind of great to approach that music again with sort of a fresh outlook, and then to get great recordings. It was just we had this like idyllic recording session. I'm a student at Princeton, and I sort of finagled my way and get one of the concert halls for the weekend, and Megan Burke is the cellist in the Rhythm Method. Her husband Bernd is an amazing recording engineer. He came out. They brought their twins. We were staying at my landlord's house, which is like this big sort of, it's not a mansion, but it's a really nice place with this like beautiful yard, and just had this great recording session. And then another close colleague of mine, Andrew McKenna Lee, did a just amazing job mixing. And so it's like, I couldn't imagine a better product. So I'm very proud
I
of
want to have a landlord like that.
Yeah, right. We lucked out there.
But yeah, I mean, that sounds just like an incredible collaboration across all these amazing artists. And especially, I feel like it's wonderful to feel comfortable with the music that you're performing and that you're creating. Like that seems very nice. And you kind of hit all of the questions that I wanted to ask in this interview, which is, there's this time when a musician has to think, what is the composer trying to say? But you being the composer yourself and performing your own music, it must be like, how's that process for you? How's that thought process? And then when you perform other people's music, how do you then take, your experience as, oh, maybe this is what they want to say, or this is what they want to do here?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if I'm going to answer this straight exactly
No worries.
the way that you presented it, but it's not like what's the difference, but creating music it has to be a collaborative thing if it's going to be any good, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there is that dumb thing where like, well, you should write it exactly how you want on the page, and then it doesn't matter, and that maybe exists a little bit in like orchestra music, but
Right.
it barely exists if you are actually actively working with a performer, whether you're performing with them or whether you're writing for them. It has to be a back and forth, and that's the only way it's going to be good. Sorry, I don't like making sweeping statements. It's not the only way it's going to be good, but a very good way to make something good is to go back and forth with your performers a lot and tailor things to them, and realize, oh, well, they play this phrase in a certain way, and that inspires me to change this phrase. Like, that's going to, in my opinion, be a great way to create an organic piece of music that the performers are going to like to play and will bring out the best in them. So
absolutely. I think there's, also for some reason, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, because I'm no composer, I play the music on the page, but I feel like there's a lot
you should try, you might like it.
Yeah, I should. There's a lot of sort of individualist kind of approach to composition. And I think it's really cool to see, dancers when they collaborate, when a choreographer collaborates and sees a dancer do a move in a specific way, and they're like, oh, that was better, let's use that, and I think it's really important to have that moment that you're saying, and you notice how someone's playing something and you're like, wait a second, this is inspiring, this is going to make me change my process as well.
Yeah.
So how do you get out of that bubble of sort of focusing in on your singular self when composing? Clearly you're just you're a big collaborator. So for composers who are trying to do that, how would you advise them to go forward with that sort of process?
Well,
sorry, that's a hard question.
No, it's a great question, because at the same time, I am also, anyone that works with me will also know that I'm a perfectionist, and that I am.
You didn't say that before.
Yeah, no. So just because I personally like to keep things as open as possible to create this kind of conversation, but I often still have an agenda,
Right.
So I guess it's the question of what is your agenda?
Yeah.
What pertinent details do you need to put on the piece of paper to best get to that endpoint? Maybe you know more about how much time you're going to have with your performer. Maybe it's your best friend that you're working with all the time, and you can almost do everything in real time. Maybe you have one good rehearsal. You're going to, of course, like change your approach depending on that. But yeah, I think I have to tell myself that I'm not going to know what it is until I actually hear it live in the room, and that I have to keep myself open to making whatever adjustments are possible given the situation, and yeah, just approaching it with that kind of approaching it with a naivete, approaching it with an open mind about what it can be, and not having just like that fixed idea. You might have to have a fixed idea as a starting point, but you just have to realize that it's going to be different no matter what. Even if what you write is the most straightforward, idiomatic stuff ever, it's still going to sound different in the room than it does in your head or from your computer playback or whatever it is that you're using. So
Yeah, all those MIDI instruments
yeah.
never sound the same.
Well,
So
it's amazing too, like composers when they use or let's not even reserve it to MIDI. A lot of people are mocking things up in other
yeah,
ways. You get so attached to that demo. Andrew McKenna Lee, the person who mixed my record, calls it demo-itis, when you're like so used to this one version that you've been hearing that you're no longer are able to even hear anything else. And anybody knows that has maybe had a demo for something and then a live performance, and then a year later they're sort of sifting through, and you're like, oh, that demo was really good, let me hear it, and you're like, oh no, that sounds horrible. What was I thinking? Even this flawed live performance is like way better than,
yeah.
than my dumb mock-up.
Oh yeah. No,
uh,
I feel like that's a common thing.
yeah,
I always get so attached to the things that I write when I'm just, writing about things, um and I have a section called award-winning text where
yeah.
I love it so much, but I know I have to let it go, and so I just delete it from the page, put it on award-winning text. So those demos need to go into that
That's
section.
great, and then you can probably dig in there when you need something
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, when I have some crappy text to pull from, I it's a good place to steal from. So
Right.
our concert will be on May 25th, and so what pieces will you be performing?
Okay, yeah, it's all coming together. So the two world premieres. One is a new piece by Angelica Negron, and she just sent us the final score 2 days ago.
Oh,
I will
exciting.
tell you the name of it because I want to make sure I get it right. Wait, I'm checking my email. Sorry.
No problem. That's why Zoom is great.
You can just get rid of that. It is called, ooh, now I have to speak Spanish with the correct accent, but it's Airbus Marinas, I believe, which is, oh gosh, she has a good little blurb about it. She's been writing a lot of music about plants, and this is an aquatic plant, and everything about it, I don't know what it sounds like yet because we haven't even rehearsed it. I have heard her demo, and it is underwater. Everything is very. I'll just leave it at that. You're going to have to hear
Okay.
it to understand more. And yeah, we're super excited about it, and it involved an electronic track as well as the guitars. But we're going to be doing a lot of electronic processing on our instruments as well, and then the other piece is another new piece by Inti Figus Visueda. We have not gotten that one yet, but and I imagine it'll come together in rehearsals quite a bit. But we've worked with Inti before, who writes really beautiful, open-oriented pieces. She approaches it in a variety of ways. So I don't know exactly how it will be approached this time, but anything from graphic ideas to instructions to sort of I believe the term is like an index score where you have lots of little options and creative approaches to form. So we're really excited to see what comes of that. And then the two quote unquote older pieces we're playing. One is by Erin Jade Santillon, who wrote us a great piece called Drowning that we premiered last year.
Cool.
And that is so Aaron plays in a lot of bands, really loves screamo. There's definitely this influence of sort of heavy music in it, but it's also very pretty and emotional, I would say. It's a beautiful piece. And then the last thing is part of a bigger project that we've been developing with Laurie Spiegel, who is a electronic music composer, very influential. I I don't know her entire biography, but her seminal album that really put her on the map was this album called The Expanding Universe, which came out, I believe, 1980, maybe 1979. And we have been working with her to reimagine a lot of these pieces on that record for live instruments, for guitars. And she's a guitarist as well, so she sort of has part of some feet in that world already. And then, in addition, almost all of the music on the record is four voices, so it works great for a quartet.
Oh, that's sick.
And yeah, we've had fun. We did our first sort of time out on that at the Stone a couple months ago, and there was the sort of opening track on the record, Patchwork, went pretty well a few months ago, but we were like, we got to dig into this even more because it's sort of one of the notier ones that we were doing. So we've been kind of woodshedding it to get that piece to the next level, and we're pretty excited to play that again. So we're adding that to kind of round out the program. So four pieces that I think going to be pretty different in the end. Different characters, different. Well, everybody's a character, but different character of the music, and I think a nice arch to it. So.
Yeah, I mean, a nice arch from underwater plants to screamo, but
Yeah.
beautiful screamo. It seems like a perfect combination. So I'm very excited to hear. And
Yeah.
and I think it's really cool to sort of also hear the electronic stuff too, because I know during the pandemic I got really into sort of these technological advances in music. So I'm really excited to hear all of that too
Yeah.
and the
Me
process.
too.
It's gonna be great. So we're reaching the end of our Zoom time, but
That's
uh,
good. Well,
thank you so much, James Moore. Really appreciate it, and I'm really excited to see your performance on May 25th at
great.
the Humana Center. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Maya. This was fun.